Then you talked about best practices, three things, fresh eyes, can't read my writing, campus inventory, and cost assumptions. So let's talk about those three things: fresh eyes, campus inventory, and cost assumptions.
See, I love how you're putting me on the spot and making me remember that I have to go through each of these things. Hi, I have one question for you, but it's in 37 points.
All right, let's talk about one at a time then. Fresh eyes. Let's talk about that.
So fresh eyes, it's just simply this. You and just think about this in your own life.
Yeah.
You've got a to-do list. You've got projects around the house that you know you need to get to,
right.
And at a certain point, it just either because of our natural tendency to avoid doing things that we don't want to do, or just because something fades into the background. Oh yeah, I know that door squeaks and I need to fix it, but I don't have the tools with me and I'm running out the door right now. I'll get to it later. So one of the advantages of bringing in someone from the outside that's new to your church campus is that you can actually use them to look around. One of the things I do every time I go to a church campus for the first time is check their signage. Can I figure out where I'm supposed to go, how I'm supposed to get there? Because it's going to be the only time I'm ever on this campus where I've not got a single blessed clue where I'm going.
Right.
It's kind of the same concept. It's sitting there and saying, hey, let's bring in somebody, whether it's an outside consultant or your insurance broker or somebody, a friend of yours from another church, somebody that can come in and actually sit there and just look at things and say, well, what about this? Or, who's responsible for fixing this thing over here? And it just makes it so much easier because you've got somebody that doesn't know the backstory or the history, or that just doesn't, I know it's on my list, but it keeps getting moved further and further down with other priorities. So, I mean, that's kind of what we mean when we sit there and talk about, hey, let's look at this with fresh eyes, or let's bring in somebody that can lay fresh eyes on this problem.
Well, and I think it's like you're so used to your own properties that you mentioned look up, look around. I think that just to look up, people, you'll go into a facility and people that haven't looked at it's like you don't go into a room to look at the ceiling or to look at the roof,
Exactly.
So it's just a matter of having that fresh set of eyes, kind of like, oh, have you ever noticed this?
My wife and I have been married for a very long time now, and she's gotten over this, but for years she would just shake her head because I'd walk into a space, I'd walk past a fire extinguisher and I'd be looking to see if it was charged, or I'd walk into a space I hadn't been in and I'd be looking up at the ceiling and going, oh look, they got a water leak over there. And I mean, she's so used to it now that she doesn't even think about it, but it's occupational hazard.
Yeah.
But most people don't do that. That's not how we experience buildings.
See, I have the total reverse relationship in my house. I don't notice anything, and my wife notices everything that needs to be fixed. And then she reminds me. And so,
marriage is a partnership.
It's a partnership,
exactly.
So you just balance out your strengths and weaknesses. There you go. All right. Second one was the campus inventory.
Sure. Yeah. So you can't plan for what you don't know about. And so for me, and look, I'm a control freak. You said it already. I'm an architect. I'm an attorney.
I did not say you were a control freak. I said those two
things.
No,
but I am those things. And both of those professions are known for being very, we draw a lot of control freaks in.
You're an attorney with good handwriting,
well,
so that's a cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that happens is that if you aren't sitting there and beginning to inventory out, especially your big ticket items, the things that don't require ongoing maintenance, then it's easy to forget about them until they break. Or until you suddenly go, oh, you know what? I don't think anybody's looked at that for a while. And so, I mean, here we're talking about, again, like roofs, obviously, things that are going to wear out pretty regularly, like carpeting in high traffic areas, those types of things. But it's also again, we did a lot of post-war building in Southern California. A lot of people were coming here that were not from California, so they were coming from back east where they built basements. For some reason, we built basements in all our buildings here. All those basements have sump pumps because they all have water issues.
Right.
When's the last time first of all, how many pumps do you have? And secondly, when's the last time anybody went around and checked them all?
Right.
Because when those stop working, it becomes even worse than if you didn't have a pump. So, it's just going through and trying to list those things out. I had a church that we were working with where we actually said to them, hey, how many HVAC units do you guys have on your campus? And they're like, oh, we have no idea. I mean, there's heating and air conditioning in each of our buildings. And it's like, great, but how many units? They didn't know. So we started actually inventorying it. We came back to them. We're like, yeah, you got 28 different heating units or cooling units. And they were blown away. They were like, yeah, if we would have thought maybe 8.
Yeah.
I mean, like we just didn't know.
Right.
Well, how can you comprehensively put together a maintenance program for that stuff if you just don't know it's there?
Right.
You know, and it becomes an important tool as well, because one of the challenges that a lot of churches have is we know statistically that most members of your congregation are coming to the church campus 3 to 5 hours a week. And there's this fallacy of presence that starts to happen where people are like, okay, well, I'm only on this church campus 3 to 5 hours a week, so surely this building's barely being used, and it's not deteriorating at the same level as if it was being used all the time. Well, first of all, most churches are being used all the time. They're just being used by different groups at different times. But secondly, it's like I said, it's just this fallacy that people start to buy into. And so if you're gonna try to be in a position where you're trying to educate people and say, hey, we actually need a plan for replacing our HVAC equipment, if you can sit there and say, and we have 28 different condensers or rooftop units or furnace units, or that people are going to be like, oh my God, I had no idea we had that many. You're right. We should really start thinking about this.
Right.
But instead it's like, I don't know, I show up on Sunday, the lights are on, the candles are lit, the screens are lit. I mean, I'm good.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, very important. And to do that, talked about, simple as Excel spreadsheet, and just document it.
Yeah,
however you document, there's 1,000 ways to document it, but just make sure you're documenting.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not just like come up with the inventory and then you can start to build on that, and you can say, okay, I have a maintenance contract on this, and this is who's doing the maintenance on it, and this is how frequently they're coming out. And, and then you can start to actually build some good data. I'm totally a data nerd.
Yeah.
I'm a nerd about many things, but I mean, data is my friend because I can actually use that. I can use it to sit there and make plans and to show people what they need to do. We can try to put together costs for it and say, hey, here's how you need to be thinking about this, and then you can rack and stack it with the rest of your priorities.
Great. And then the last is cost assumptions. And in today's world, just about, in our world, we talked about replacement cost and building cost and labor cost. And I was fascinated. You said since 2020, so in the last 3 years, we're talking a 25% increase, 20 to 25% increase.
Yeah, I was just in a presentation that was being given by a construction economist, and those were the numbers he was putting out there, and he had all the data to back it up. It was pretty interesting, and we all saw during the COVID pandemic that, and this was mostly a supply chain, you just couldn't get stuff, but we saw just massive cost escalation. Plywood was going up in price monthly. Same thing with lumber. That has moderated to a certain extent, but we're still seeing in Southern California really substantial cost escalation. When you think about the fact that the Fed is spending a lot of time in raising interest rates and trying to get inflation back down under 7.5% towards their 2% target. When we're talking about a construction cost inflation that's running 3 to almost 4 times that. Right. At 20 to 25%, that's a pretty significant increase. And so what that means is if you get a bid for something today and it's something you're not going to touch for a couple of years, then you really have to be thinking about, well, how much do I need to run that number up?
Right.
But the other one, which is what we were talking about before, is like for replacement cost for buildings when you're doing your insurance. You've got to go back and look at those numbers. And if you haven't updated them since 2020, you're going to be in for a rude awakening when you actually start looking at what it would cost to replace your building today. And so you've got to really think about that. And I was telling you the story about the church that hadn't updated their replacement values since sometime in the mid 1980s. That's an extreme example,
sure.
and I think that's just a failure on the part of their insurance broker and frankly their insurance carrier. But easy trap to fall into. And so I think you really have to be thinking about these things because we know costs have gone up a lot.
Right.